arms towards the sun, you feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive and you don't have to be afraid.
Jake Angeli-Chansley is the man who was wearing buffalo horns and coyote skins with his face painted during the January 6th protest. His image became almost synonymous with that day. But who was that man? Why was he there? What, from his perspective, really happened? I met Jake on Twitter, and he was kind enough to agree to do this interview. He's a truly fascinating guy, and I'm very excited to introduce to you, the Bassline audience, the American shaman, Jake Angeli-Chansley. How are you today, Jake? Thank you for joining me on the Bassline.
I'm doing well. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Most people ask me to like fill something out, like, you introduce yourself or whatever. It's like, oh, all right. Oh, but you did a great job.
Well, I appreciate that. And man, I'm very excited for this because I've heard your Twitter spaces on a few occasions, and I find you to be a genuinely fascinating person. And I just love the idea of looking past our initial perception of something, right? Your image was sort of used in a way. You were used as a propaganda prop, unfortunately, in this whole melee situation that was portrayed. But there's always much more to things than meet the eye, and you are a very good example of that. And I want to just start, I guess, by asking you about that day before we get into all these other interesting things I want to discuss with you. What was your recollection of January 6th in general, and what are some of the key things that you think people should be aware of in regard to the misconceptions associated with that event?
Okay. So, well, first of all, thank you for having me. And I'll try to break this down as quickly as I can. This subject in particular is kind of complex. So let's start, I suppose, with how did it even happen in the first place, right? I mean, if you want to know like my perspective, like what happened that day, that's really not as remarkable as how what happened that day took place. So the uh Capitol Police Chief's son requested was able to request National Guard presence at the Capitol at will until Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell changed the law a couple of weeks before January 6th of 2021. They changed the law so that Chief Son had to ask for permission from Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell in order to invoke the National Guard. He had to do so in written form, right? So they changed the law, they stripped him of his power. And then he actually did request of them that they allow the National Guard to be there. And they said no, because they said it would be bad optics and that there was no it was not necessary, or there was no reason to have them there, basically. And that there's no intelligence to provide that's being provided that says that this is necessary, basically. All the while, the FBI, CIA, even investigators in like journalists and stuff like that, they weren't reporting on what it is that they were hearing or what the underground was saying, that there was supposed to be, there was going to likely be a riot that day. And it's almost as though that the government planned on it that way. When you notice there's like 200 some odd FBI or federal agents in the crowd, whether they be FBI or CIA. And then you also realize they haven't released all the January 6th footage. And this is a lot of the time because there's things that is in that footage that would actually incriminate the government, like these people being dressed as Trump supporters, like these federal people being dressed as Trump supporters inside the building before it was ever breached, things like that. Okay. And so what happened was not, and this is also the other thing, all of this information about the possibility of there being violence or a riot or something like that did get to Yogananda Pittman, the chief or the intelligence officer for Capitol Police. And she chose to sit on it, right? Her and her staff chose to sit on that information. She is a Democrat, just to let you know, sit on that information and not give it to Chief Son. Okay, so the FBI, the CIA, the intelligence went to Capitol Police that they should have somebody there, but this woman suppressed it from Chief Son, so he couldn't fill out the paperwork necessary to get the National Guard on the Capitol grounds. Do you understand? Okay.
Basically adding
So,
bureaucracy and slowing down the process of security and their ability to respond to a hypothetical emergency.
well, yes, but also like it was all strategic. These were strategic moves. And then there was also that whole fake pipe bomb thing that was planted outside of the DNC and the RNC. Okay. These things are operations, okay, to stop the certification of the vote, right? They didn't want the debate. Actually, it was the Democrats that wanted to stop the vote, not the Republicans. The Republicans wanted to talk it out and debate about whether or not some of these electoral votes were even legitimate or legal. Because it was in some of these states, people were like, hey, there looks like there's some fraud here. And they're like, hold on, we need to investigate this to see what's actually going on. But because of the riot, and if the riot didn't happen because of the pipe bomb, one way or the other, they were going to try to stop the certification from taking place, and then have everybody come back and be like, we need to certify because this is an outrage and blah, 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 blah. So they just certify blankly without investigating the election. Okay. So when you look into all of these things and the fact that the FBI, the CIA, the Capitol Police Intelligence, Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, all these people knew what was going to happen, but they made sure that Chief Sund didn't have the ability to invoke the National Guard and also didn't have the information necessary to invoke the National Guard. And he had to go through them. That's why the riot took place. It was allowed to take place. It was a government op, in my opinion. That's what I believe. Okay.
Right.
There was also Antifa and BLM mixed in there. One of the things I noticed that day personally was that there were no Antifa or BLM antagonizers or counter protesters moving through the crowds of Trump supporters like there was at other events, like there was at the last MAGA Million March I went to in December of 2020. So that is another thing. That's one thing I noticed. I also noticed there were people in the crowd with their faces covered, all in like tactical gear, like earpieces and stuff. And I thought that's weird. You know, like, what are these people doing? You know, like, wait, it's a protest, bro. Like, what are you dressing up? Are you LARPing here? Like, what are you doing? You know, but come to find out later on, it may very well be because they were federal informants or, you know, they were federal agents themselves. So January 6th was a deep state setup that turned into a deep state psyop. The psyop was there. I mean, the setup was there for the psyop, okay, for the optics of the whole thing, okay?
Sure.
And that's how this game is fought, is through optics, through the public's reaction to external stimuli and situations, and which way the political wind blows. So this was basically an orchestrated op to blow the wind in the direction of the deep state on multiple different levels and multiple different fronts. That's why the psyop of J6 has been pushed so much. And that's also why, in particular, they try to use my image so often, because it's a image that invokes emotion. So by invoking emotion, you actually solidify or in some cases even jar loose neuro-linguistic programming. Okay, so you're able to more easily control the brain, the subconscious brain, when you can stimulate emotions in combination with messages. Does that make sense?
It does.
So yeah, it was a deep state setup, as in the government, the three-branch government system, the bureaucracy, and international entities. It was a trifecta, if not more, of agencies or groups with a common goal that hijacked the day. And I was doing my best to just try to keep things calm, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, within 30 seconds of being inside the building, I stopped somebody from stealing. The only reason the cops were escorting me around the building later on was because I offered to help them clear the Senate. And I said a prayer, wrote a note, helped them clear the building, said thank you, blah, 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 blah. As soon as I get outside, not even like an hour or two later, I think, like not much longer after I get outside, when Donald Trump put out his tweet, I was the one telling everybody to go home. I was stopping people from breaking in, telling everybody to go home, trying to diffuse the conflict, trying to calm people down, but none of that fit into the narrative. you see. And this is also, I think, part of the reason why they tried to discredit me so much as well, because I am like if you just follow my story,
Yeah.
then it is the Achilles heel to this whole propaganda campaign.
Let me ask you, just sort of in the first place, if you could convey to us what was just your basic sentiment as to why you were there in the first place?
Well, I
What
was
was the
there because
sentiment
of the ley lines. I was there because, like, in shamanism, you understand that there's these electromagnetic lines that run through the earth, and when they overlap or they crisscross, right? Then what ends up happening is there's a massive, like in that area where it's crossed, there's this massive amount of energy that's like vortexes that are like moving energy through that area, and so it's like a sacred space. And that's what all the Washington, monument building, like monuments and buildings and stuff are built on, is that ley line grid system. And so if there's going to be 1 million people assembled on the ley lines and I can be there, I should be, as a shamanic practitioner, right? These are sacred sites built on electromagnetic ley lines that are that have the potential to be highly charged and affect the collective mind of the planet, of humanity. And most people just don't know that because they don't think that deep. They don't do their research. So that was my reason for being there, both on December 12th of 2020 and on January 6th. But then there's also political reasons, but they're political slash spiritual. And that is that for over 100 years, government this federal government is getting bigger and bigger, and it is oppressing the people. It is turning into a tyrannical state, whether it be the installation of the Federal Reserve, or it be the Tuskegee experiments. It be like the list goes on and on. I mean, the radiation experiments done on cities, on unsuspecting populations. There's I mean, and that's just in the early, from the early 1900s on into like the 50s and the 60s. There's things like MK Ultra, Project Artichoke. There's things like Operation Paperclip, or Project Paperclip, and Operation Mockingbird, and like the list goes on and on. Then you get like 9/11, or Waco, Texas, or Oklahoma City, or you get things like the Boston thing, right? Boston bombing, or the Vegas thing, the Vegas shooting. No answers, dude. No answers. And then, we get told for 4 years, Russia, 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 even though they all know it's a lie. And Hillary got away with smashing her hard drives and, wiping all of her and bleaching her computers or whatever, and destroying evidence, right? The very thing that they're accusing me of, being guilty of is actually the thing Hillary Clinton was guilty of, as funny as that is. But and that's 20 years in prison, by the way. It's a maximum sentence. And of all people, if what she was trying to hide, she probably would have gotten a lot more than that. But case in point, then you have the 2020 stuff, right? So we've been lied to, gaslit. People have been getting away with all sorts of crazy, awful, terrible shit, right? We got the wars in the Middle East, the money laundering going on there, people dying, drone strikes, like insanity. What Edward Snowden was telling everybody about, like all of these things are building up. And then in 2020, bro, you got what? COVID and the lockdowns. Then you got the riots. Then you've got the Hunter Biden laptop. Well, and not to mention during 2020, like Trump supporters being targeted for like violence and stuff like that. The riots and people burning down cities, and no governor standing up, lockdowns with the COVID. And then you've also got what they're teaching our kids. Then you've got the Hunter Biden laptop suppression. Then you got the 2020 election. Like all of those things are spiritual abuses on the minds of the people, the sovereignty and the freedoms, the liberties of the people. That is what those things that I have just listed are. And miscarriages of justice, or injustice in every way, shape, and form. And even if like 10 to 20% of the things that I just said are the only things that are true and actually happened, even though all of them are actually what happened, are actually realities. But even if it's just 10 to 20%, those would be enough of a reason for our founding fathers to be like, yeah, fuck this shit. because they rebelled over a 3% tax. So I put all of that stuff together politically, as well as all of this spiritual stuff, and the fact that emanating from Washington, D.C. is where all these abuses are, like the source of these abuses is coming from DC. You see what I'm trying to say? So of course I'm going to be on the ley lines. Of course I'm going to be banging my drum and singing my song. Of course I'm going to be present for, a fight for the soul of the country. Or, do you understand what I'm trying to say? Did I expect it
Yes.
to go that way? No. No, of course not. And I tried to do everything I could to calm things down. I tried to remain level-headed, as funny as that is, considering my attire. But you would not have known any of that. The media
Yeah.
just chose to exploit my image for their propaganda campaign, which was actually in some ways a very big mistake.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in with a couple of thoughts. I just wanted to say, as far as where I'm coming from with the whole January 6th thing, and I can't claim to have actually researched the event thoroughly. I've just seen quite a bit about it, but I haven't sat and tried to comprehensively determine, well, what happened on that day, or what have you. But I'll just say, first of all, I'm very much opposed to the usage of shock value language. Like, I just think it's really it's very disingenuous the way the term terrorist has been used in general since the so-called war on terror was declared. Um, for example, there's a lot of people who do something that's somewhat terroristic in nature, but a terrorist implies someone with political affiliation. And there's some people that say, well, that's not a terrorist, that's just what you call
Well,
a
yeah,
nutcase.
ruling through fear, is essentially what it comes down to. And
But
and that's
likewise,
what
the term
tyrants have done
insurrection.
for thousands of years.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But I strongly object to the term insurrection, right? Insurrection is an
Oh,
attempt to overthrow the government. I just feel like when you use language that you loosely, it's hard to take you
well, hold on.
seriously.
But here's the thing, they're not using it loosely. They're using it strategically. And this is what I was saying about like the psyop element to January 6th, is that it was a psyop intended to go after Trump and his supporters. So if they use the term insurrection over and over and over again, then they can use that propaganda as a way of trying to get Trump off the ballot because of insurrection or because of the 14th Amendment. You see,
Right.
it's also a way of dehumanizing his supporters that were arrested because they went into the building that day. And so, as their constitutional rights are violated, most of the people look the other way because they're just insurrectionists, you see.
Yeah.
And notice also that the term insurrection is not really a term anybody heard as far as the public is concerned until January 6th, at least not in the volume that we've heard it. And that's
Yeah.
because first of all, the idea of revolution has a whole different connotation to the emotional state of the brain, but also things like
Right.
insurrection, which haven't been heard, they're able to then apply context to and then give them
Right.
faces to process like what
Oh,
that
right. No,
context
of
means.
course. I mean, of course, it was being strategically used, but I mean, in terms of an effect of reducing our specificity in our usage of language with each other when we're throwing around terms without applying more specific meaning when we speak, and sort of conditioning people in that in this kind of like defective kind of communication. But I want to ask you about, and actually, you know what, before I even ask you my next question, I do want to just take the time quickly to draw a quick historical parallel while I'm having the opportunity to speak with you. There's something that is really an unknown, sort of mostly unknown event in history, which is what I call R2K, the Republican National Convention. I was involved in a massive protest, and I relate very much to January 6th because it reminds me of R2K. I was there with any number of activists who were protesting George Bush. We were calling him Governor Death because he had used the death penalty more than any other governor in history at that point. I think his record's been broken by another Texas governor. But yeah, I mean, we were protesting George Bush and his legacy as a member of the Bush family of war criminals, basically. And it was a massive protest. It was people from all around the country. It was intellectuals. It was college professors. It was people from different various organizations who converged for this protest. And there was, first of all, the whole event started with after a week of sort of planning within what we call affinity groups, it started with mass preemptive arresting of people. There was a puppet warehouse, a puppeteer in Philadelphia who was actually a known puppet maker. He had lent his studio out for puppet making to support the protest, right? And what did they do? As soon as they knew this protest was going to occur, they went straight to the puppet warehouse. They systematically collected all of the puppets and had them trash compacted, which to me says a lot about the power of art. And then they arrested all of these people preemptively, accusing them of basically being like domestic terrorists, in their initial accusation, including like my girlfriend at the time and dozens of my close friends and like 500 activists. It was, free the Philadelphia 500, who I don't know if actually any of the January Sixers were aware of this, but they did something very effective at that time, which was called jail solidarity. No one providing any identification. So they had arrested basically 500 John and Jane Does. And the system itself just doesn't even have the resources to process that many cases. So it means all kinds of pleas and whatever, like, their
No, I haven't
abuses
heard
get,
of it, but I mean,
jail
Lord knows
solidarity.
they're
But
probably going to be having a ball with the fact that we're talking. I had no idea about any of that
yeah,
regarding
exactly.
you. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's crazy. So basically all I'll say is it was just sort of by chance that I wasn't arrested on that day for my nonviolent actions. It was, as someone put it pretty well, it was an exercise in nonviolent paramilitary activity, like
Uh,
paramilitary minus the military component, but obstructing, pathways and whatnot, all various tactics. But the point is that I sat there that night with my girlfriend in jail and dozens of my friends incarcerated at, that earlier that day. And I was sitting literally in a pizza parlor, just watching on the news as they just portrayed us as outright freaks. I mean, it was just, that was sort of the theme of how they described us. It was what, we weren't people protesting the prison industrial complex and that kind of thing. We were just freaks. We were anarchists. They even came up with something, I remember, that we wanted to unleash mice and vermin into the city, which is like, wow, they actually like got a little bit creative and like made this we wanted to unleash, I don't know, whatever. They made these outlandish claims, and it was like, wow, they really, when the media determines to portray something in a certain way, they go all out. I mean, so much for like objective journalism and that kind of thing. It's definitely not that kind of feel. It's definitely like, this is how it's being portrayed. This is the agenda that we're framing around this. But you also were running for Congress recently, right? Could you tell us a little bit about that campaign? Why did you end your campaign? What was that experience like?
well, I ran as a third party candidate. So in Arizona, the way the law is tailored, third party candidates pretty much have to get like 20, 25, maybe 30% of the registered voters in their third party candidate uh, party. They have to get like 20 something, 30 something percent of those signatures in order to get on the ballot. Whereas Republicans and Democrats, they only have to get something like, you know, 0.5% of the registered Republicans or Democrats in the area. And that's because of the way the law is written. That's not actually like what the law says, but that is in effect what the law does.
Right.
The law says that third party candidates have to draw from a pool of their own party. In like, if so, let's say I'm running as a libertarian, I had to draw from a pool of libertarians, independent, and no party affiliation, which means I had to get like 800 or so signatures, more like 1,000 actually, if you really want to be fair about it. That's, you always want to get more signatures in case any of them are contested. So I had to get like 1,000 signatures, 800 around 800 legally to like beat the threshold to get on the ballot. But all I had access to was the 3,000 or so registered libertarians and their information in my area that I could collect signatures from. You see? So I
Yeah.
would have to get all of like a third of the signatures of the registered party to which I belong, and I would have drive all
Not
over
an
the
easy
freaking
task.
place. It's
No, it's
not
not.
easy, especially when you're not accepting donations, when it's a grassroots effort, right? When I don't have any like big super PAC or whatever behind me. The whole idea of what I was trying to do was run a campaign the way that I figured the founding fathers would want one run, you know, not with a whole bunch of money and big donors and all that stuff. Um, so forgive me, I have to sneeze.
Uh, Gesundheit.
Sorry about that. So
No problem.
I learned a lot though during the time I was running. I learned a lot. I learned that everything that the Republicans are accusing the Democrats of doing, they're doing themselves. And everything the Democrats are accusing the Republicans of doing, they are also doing themselves. That it is the biggest corrupt backdoor dealing fallible or fouled machine, and it is soulless. It is absolutely soulless in every
Yeah.
way. There's a few good people in this machine. I will say that I've met some good people. They're not all bad. In fact, that's the only thing that kind of keeps your hope alive is the good people that you meet in some of these places. But as far as the system itself, bro, it's all based on money and the creation of a caricature that a certain group of people or a certain amount of people in the community are going to like. And most of them are probably not going to even vote at all. So you have to really kind of go for the really scrupulous, judgmental people that, you know, uh, which is a good thing, you know, but some people are really open to the idea of party influence. So if you're a Republican, you're getting their vote, or you're a Democrat, you're getting their vote. It doesn't matter, you know,
Yeah.
and that is a large part of how it is that all of this goes is you have groups of people, like large groups of people like that, and then you also have these smaller groups that control these larger groups, you see, and these smaller groups that control the larger groups do so through putting on a face, creating a candidate, using money to push that candidate, using money to smear the other candidates. You know, it's not for me.
Yeah. I've always held a belief for some time that the so-called two parties are really one party pretending to be two. And therefore, whoever wins, the party wins. It's sort of like the system is very skilled, it seems, at playing good cop, bad cop within itself. Like even in regard to the COVID tyranny, the mandates, and the all of the absurdities of that, it was like the Democrats were suddenly like all on board with this medical tyranny thing. And some Republicans resisted it, but as a party, they didn't resist it per se. There was not a strong, unified effort saying, this is tyranny. It was like a couple of voices that sort of leaked out of the party to express opposition to it, but there was no actual opposition that was rivaling the political force that was imposing all this stuff on us, right?
That is
I would
correct.
love to ask you, yeah, and I would love to ask you, as a matter of fact, about the medical freedom movement, your perception of it. Are you a part of that movement? What were your feelings about the COVID lockdown period, the introduction of the experimental vaccine, or we call it the product that was falsely marketed as a vaccine on this program? Um, what are your feelings about the medical freedom movement and the COVID laws that were put in place, or mandates, which actually I should correct myself, because a mandate is not a law, right? That's specifically it. It was something that did not go through the legislative process. So what are your feelings about the COVID event and the medical freedom movement that has emerged from that?
Well, the COVID 19, what I like to call COVID 1984 and the pandemic,
Yeah.
did a great deal to wake people up and show people the big pharma controlled deep state. You know, that element of the deep state. There, every element to which the deep state is corrupt in the pharmaceutical area, like the corruption of FDA or the corruption of NIH or whatever, uh, almost all of the other, if not all of the other bureaucratic agencies are of similar levels of corruption, right? And because there are corporations that profit from our sickness or illness or disease, uh, tremendous amounts of pressure were used with the machine that we call the media, what I call the mockingbird media, all repeating the same thing. And that in conjunction with Hollywood and all these movies about viruses and viral outbreaks scaring the shit out of people for 10 years. And then all of a sudden they seeing this shit all over the TV, just being blasted about the number of deaths and number of cases, how hospitals are packed. And you know what I'm
You
saying?
know what's
So
one
it
question
was,
I have about that? I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's one question that I've always thought was just interesting in terms of that fear being projected onto people at that time is just the whole what's the term, the germophobic quality within people. I wonder how many people, if out of a nation of 330 million, if you project on television, there is a terrible disease being circulated. How many people right at that instant grab their throats and say, I'm sick? Like how many people
well,
psychosomatically become ill
everybody,
just upon the
yeah,
announcement?
yeah, they fear that. And that's the thing, is that especially when you factor in things like the fluoride, the atrazine, the aspartame, the glyphosate, the list goes on and on. You factor all these things in there, it makes the mind very susceptible to this propaganda and these frequencies. So you're not a very deep thinker. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I think that COVID was an attempt to lock down the world and do like a test run for something like the New World Order. I think that it largely failed as far as in its attempts to capture imaginations and force compliance. Because if they try to do it again, most people aren't going to go along with it. Most people are tired of it. Most people are never going to get another fucking vaccine that they're told is safe and effective ever again. You know what I mean? And it's because, like you were just saying, that's not a vaccine. It's mRNA gene therapy. It is a bioweapon. Okay, both the COVID 1984 virus, plus
Yeah.
the mRNA gene
I call it the
therapy. Those are
one-two
a part.
punch.
They're a part of the same parallel bioweapons research. Okay,
Well, it's
when
the
they
jab
develop
that
a
leads you into the
bioweapon,
cross.
they always create a vaccine or some form of immune uh, I guess sturdying or strengthening process, immune system strengthening process, like a vaccine or something that is going to allow people to be immune to this virus, so that if and when they decide to use this virus, they can give all of their soldiers or sailors or whatever their vaccine, and then the
Right.
virus won't have as much blowback when it eventually hits the population that released it.
Right.
So that's why these things are parallel. But the thing is that in particular with this mRNA gene therapy that we're talking about right now, they didn't take certain genetic signatures out of it that actually make the virus itself more deadly and the body more susceptible to not just the COVID 1984 virus, but also to other illnesses as well. It actually compromises the immune system in a number of ways. And the virus, COVID 1984, and the mRNA gene therapy actually fit together like lock and key or hand and glove to destroy the immune system and to create some level, at least or another, of dis-ease or premature death due to things like comorbidities.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've written some articles about this stuff. Most recently I wrote an article uh, called The Grand Unveiling. And I think it's kind of interesting in terms of it started out that supposedly, and I don't necessarily believe this number, but they claimed 81% of the population had taken their initial COVID shot. But then a number of people took one shot but never completed the series, quote unquote, and never took their second shot to become fully vaccinated. So they dropped down right away from 81% to 70% in terms of the number of people who took one shot, didn't take two. And then booster after booster after booster. It's a steep downhill slope until we get to less than 3% of the population. Maybe it's not even 3%, maybe it's even 1%. Maybe they're exaggerating in their failure. But no one's interested in these boosters anymore. People stopped following the science, quote unquote. They were all about following the science, and then they just arbitrarily stopped. But it's interesting because we go from 81% being pro-vax and 19% being the outsiders, the weirdos who didn't want to go along with it. And actually, that 19% is a monumentally large group compared to the less than 3% ultimately who were the real true blue vaxxers. Everyone else was just faking the funk pretty much. They were pretending
Well,
like they were down, but they weren't really committed.
and then there's also, dude, the fact that I wish I would have mentioned this earlier with COVID, is that there were, like, I think there was like $3.4 trillion or something like that that was made because of COVID. And there was like something like 500 new billionaires that were created during COVID. And then like 60% of small businesses went under or more during COVID. So it was a massive wealth transfer in a number of different ways, not just during the lockdowns, but also due to these vaccines that they were
Right,
pushing on everybody and making you out to be a socially like a social leper if you didn't get,
right,
you know.
right.
So in my opinion, it was a failure. I don't think that they got exactly what they were hoping for. And I really do think that they're on their heels on a global scale right now. What we're going to have to do is similar how it's a war over our minds to believe in their bullshit. It's going to have to also be a war for their minds where we convince them that they can't evade the truth. And I
Yeah,
think that's really the weapon that we all should wield is a peaceful heart and a sharp tongue.
yeah,
Because if you speak the right words and you emit the right vibe, you can change some hearts and you can change some minds. And that's more what we really need now more than ever.
absolutely. I have the honor and the pleasure of interviewing Steph Zamorano, Jimmy Dore's wife, and I'm still awaiting Jimmy's appearance on this program. We're still trying to nail down that date, but I enjoyed his interview with you, and I was listening to that in preparation for this discussion, and you gave an outstanding and concise description and explanation of what the deep state is. And I would love for you to go over that with the listening audience because it's a term that's getting, again, thrown around all over the place. And no one's in general taken the time to define what they're referring to. So give us that rundown of what the deep state consists of.
Sure. Okay. So our founding fathers defined tyranny as the consolidation of all three branches of government into like a single power, a centralized power. So they defined tyranny the way that they did because with the crown, they were dealing with the crown writing the laws, the crown enforcing the laws, and adjudicating the laws. So the deep state is our three branch government system with all of its checks and balances being corrupted by the same like international corrupting force. So as the checks and balances portions are basically circumvented and you have a centralization of power where all three branches of the government end up cooperating with one another through this system or this weaving of corruption throughout its institutions, right? And having a tyranny. Then you also have the fourth branch of government, which is the bureaucracy that was never part of the Constitution. And that is comprised of over 500 federal regulatory agencies that regulate commerce. Now, what they do is they regulate commerce by saying what we can buy and what we can sell, what is legal and what is illegal, which is basically writing law, right? And then they have their own regulation enforcement agents that enforce these regulations, and they have their own administrative courts that are completely outside of the federal court system. So they're writing laws, legislative, they're enforcing laws, executive, and they're adjudicating laws, that's judicial, and they're all doing this within their little umbrella or within their little portion of the government. So that's tyranny. And then what you have is you have all these international entities like international banking cartels, international corporations, non-government organizations, et cetera, or international entities like the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, NATO, et cetera, right? You have all of these organizations, these international entities, the IMF, the Bank of International Settlements, all of these things, are in charge of very specific compartments within this much larger deep state, international deep state system. Okay, and they're the ones that are using this corruption in government to do their bidding in our country through corporations, government agencies, nonprofit organizations, you name it, charities, foundations, yada, LLCs. It's all a matter, and military contracts, all of this stuff plays into the deep state, and how less than 1% of the population is actually ruling these massive mobs of people that are all fighting one another over the propaganda being spewed by this less than 1%.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, I mean, the whole COVID thing certainly opened my eyes, and I haven't really answered any of my fundamental questions in terms of who are the real puppet masters here. Because, I wrote in one of my recent articles, it's like when 9/11 happened, there was this weird effect that the news agencies were all repeating the same lines. Like, wait, who writes this stuff? I didn't realize the people who write the lines for CNN also write for Fox, and they also write for MSNBC, and that also gets funneled down to your local network affiliates and whatnot. But then we saw that on an international scale, in terms of different world leaders now reading from the same script, which then raises the question, well, who wrote that script? And I really do think like people are sort of like carrying on as though they figured that part out, and they didn't even begin to figure that part out. Like we all saw that, and we didn't stop and actually officially answer the question, well, who the hell is running this thing? Who does that? Okay, the World Economic Forum. Okay, well, that's who we're allowed to see. I don't take for granted that the people who are really the most powerful people at the end of the day, at the top of the pyramid, so to speak, I don't necessarily think that those are people that we've seen or people whose names we've necessarily heard of. I don't know if they've necessarily given speeches to the public or appeared on television. I don't know. It seems kind of interesting how the World Economic Forum also appear, and a lot of very shady
it was
stuff.
actually born out of the Bilderberg group. So Klaus Schwab used to be like one of the top dudes at the Bilderberg group. So like
Right.
the World Economic Forum is like the PR firm for the Bilderberg group, basically.
Okay, there you go. And I wonder, how does this play into the Trilateral Commission and all these other various groups?
Council on Foreign Relations. Oh yeah, dude, all that stuff. NATO. Here's the thing, dude. We are living in a system that is based on illusions. The illusion of the amount of money that's actually in circulation, for example, right?
Right.
Our economy, the amount of money that's in circulation is mostly digital, right? There's no actual like real cash, like real value behind the money that we have, right? And that's just one element to the illusions we believe. Over half of the government's documentation is considered classified. Okay, and they have all sorts of ways, which we just learned because of this whole thing with Fauci and COVID and the emails and all that these motherfuckers are using encrypted lines of communication, that they have people that handle FOIA requests. That way people can't know the truth. They have people that will wipe stuff off the internet or wipe stuff off of their computers if they do have to do FOIA. They have ways of destroying evidence. And this all came out because of this congressional hearing with Fauci. And keep in mind, there's been no prosecutions here. So you look at the situation and you say, okay, if over half of the documentation is classified, and if and when we ask for answers that we are legally obliged to have access to, that evidence is being destroyed, then how much do we actually really know about what is going on in the world right now, and what role our tax dollars are paying in that, in that world, what direction our tax dollars are pushing our people, our planet, our species.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing to me, and like, again, I don't admire any of these political figures. I don't support any politician. I don't endorse any political party or whatever. But I find it amazing, for example, in talking to Biden supporters who, I point out to people, I say, look, um, you know, you talk to a lot of people in America, they just know that when Joe Biden came into office, the cost of things increased dramatically, and they'll vote against him simply on that basis. They don't sit around reading the Financial Times and looking into geopolitics particularly. They have simple jobs, they have kids to take care of, bills to pay. What the heck? Joe Biden came into office and something that cost $1 now costs $1.50, right? And then
Well,
people will
it's
say,
more
"Oh,
like
well,
four
that wasn't
dollars
his."
in some
Yeah,
cases.
yeah, exactly. Now we're getting to, like, the $10 box of cereal type of thing. So,
Yeah, and the like
then
$12 thing of eggs, you know?
yeah, it's insane. So, and meanwhile, employment stability has gone down, it seems. It's that there's all these economic pressures from all these different coming from all these different angles. And then I'll say, well, what about all this money being pumped into Ukraine? Because they'll say, oh, well, it's not Joe Biden's fault. That happened in the world economy. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm sure him hemorrhaging money in Ukraine has nothing to do with it. We couldn't have possibly used those tens of billions of dollars to correct some of the things that are going on in major American cities and towns, right? We had no use for that money. Of course, we should be pouring tens of billions of dollars into an unwinnable war on the other side of the planet that we provoked over a period of time. And it's like just this disconnect and saying, well, yes, that does affect the global economy. It's not just this random sort of ebb and flow that is, the whole world is susceptible to. No, they instituted things that very much created this effect, like blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, for example, which no one wants to talk about. Like, oh, we're so responsible. We like to do things like blow up pipelines that take us to the brink of World War
You know,
III.
you know what's crazy about that though is that these are the same freaking people that are screaming about the idea of methane being bad for the environment. So we have to stop, having cattle farms, right?
Right.
But that
Because
pipeline
cow
was carrying
farts.
methane, from what I understand, and that was the largest dump of methane into our atmosphere in, as far as
World
like
history.
industrial history is concerned, as far as we know, that was the
Yeah.
largest dump of methane into the atmosphere, was Nord Stream 2. So, what is methane really that, like, you care so much about the planet that you want to
Yeah.
stop people from farming and having cattle, but you're more than willing to blow up a pipeline that just dumps billions and billions and billions of gallons of methane into the sea and then up into the atmosphere. Like, oh yeah, you don't care about the fishes in the sea, you don't care about the environment, you don't care about the atmosphere. Like, none of those things matter to these people. And that's
Yeah.
why
The
we really
hypocrisy.
need new leadership. That's why
Yeah.
what we
It's
need, bro, and
incredible.
this is just my opinion, we
Yeah.
need like shamanic leadership. We need
Yeah.
spiritual and leadership that has political ramifications if it is followed.
Yeah. I don't
The thing
disagree.
is that what we're dealing with is political agendas that have spiritual ramifications. What
Yeah.
we need is spiritual like policies that have political ones. Do you understand what I'm trying to
Right.
say? Political
Yeah. What's
ramifications.
interesting? It's funny, right before you said that, there was a thought that I had that I wanted to convey based on what we were discussing, which is, isn't it bizarre that we live in this realm of leaders who you won't find one presidential candidate, for example, who was talking about the water. Let's make sure that everyone has clean water, that our water systems are up to date. You won't find anyone talking about let's help our farmers. I have a big plan to help the farmers. You won't hear anyone talking about, let's talk to the teachers. Let's ask the teachers what's going on. And like the basic problems, the things that we could really repair in our society with some political will, as they like to call it, they never even have that discussion. They're just discussing like sort of abstract things and like, these various sort of topics that are just kind of sprinkled around to discuss, but there's no just like our water, our food, the children learning properly, like the basic discussion, the staples of our society. You won't hear any
Well,
leader
and actually,
engage in
but
practical discussion.
I am one of those people talking about that. I don't know how long you've been following me on X or Twitter, but dude, I've been talking about that for years. Like even before
Right.
January 6th, I was talking
But I
about
mean,
the
at the
things that you're
presidential
talking about.
level, for example, right? Like
What's
you
that?
just wouldn't hear. I mean, at the presidential level, for example,
Oh, I know. But here's
not.
the thing, dude, is that at that presidential level, because of the way these psyops have been used on people, if you start talking to the Republicans or a Republican crowd about the damage being done to the environment by toxic waste in their water. Like you talk about East Palestine, Ohio, right? And they're like,
Yeah,
yeah, what happened to the environment is terrible. But then the moment you start talking to them about the glyphosate in the Roundup in the food and on the farms and how terrible it is for the environment, but the moment you start talking, you say terrible for the environment or blah blah blah, the environment, you throw that in there, they tune you right out, and that's by
yeah.
design. And with the
Hmm.
other side, with the left, with the Democrats, the moment you start talking that way, then they get all riled up. That gets their minds into it. And you can tell them whatever the F you want, dude. And they'll be like,
Hmm.
oh, yeah, save
Yeah,
environment, save environment, And the thing
yeah,
is
yeah,
that both sides are having their ignorance used against them as a weapon.
yeah.
Because if either side really did their research into these things, what they would find is that there most certainly is some sort of like an existential pollutive environmental crisis that is taking place. And it is our fault as humanity. But that has
Yeah.
nothing to do with the fact that the climate is changing, the fact that the poles are moving, the fact that the sun is going through different cycles, as is the earth,
Right,
the fact that all of
right.
these things are changing. And that's the way it's always been, right?
Yeah,
But we can and are affecting the environment to the point to where we're poisoning our water, we're poisoning our food, we're poisoning our air, we're causing mass extinctions, and this is having ramifications not just on us now but will for generations to come. And if we keep going
yeah,
down this road, then the kind of dystopia that these people are trying to pretend to save the planet from is actually going to occur. But the only reason why it is this the way that it is because the people that are being trusted to save the planet are actually the ones producing the chemicals that are destroying it.
yeah. Let me ask you, because I heard you in a Twitter space earlier. You hosted one, and I was tuning in as well as I could. And you were quite impressive, I have to say. It was really a great space. I mean, you gave like almost like a 2 hour plus lecture. It wasn't like sort of a back and forth conversation. It was a commentary on your part. What's the format of how you do that? Are you reading off of a paper at all? Are these things you've written down? This is you speaking from the top of your head, right? Did you have an outline on a piece of paper?
Well, hold on one second. My dog is growling, and I think somebody's at the door. I'll be right back. Okay.
Go ahead. I'll talk to the audience while you go check out the door.
My apologies.
No problem. So actually, I'm glad there's a little break because I didn't get a chance to promote this program, The Baseline. And I just want to say to the listeners out there, I appreciate your support so much after this first year of broadcasting. And I really am counting on you guys to continue to support this program. Please do whatever you can to spread the links to these interviews all around the internet. Send them to people via text message, via WhatsApp, what have you. It's really a grassroots movement. I don't have a manager. I have no corporate sponsorship of any kind. This is totally a labor of love. And the more you guys can support this, the more I can justify my commitment to this to my wife. And also, please check out my Substack, of course. Subscribe for free if you haven't already. If you could be a paid subscriber, that's truly awesome. But don't let not having the funds prevent you from subscribing in the first place, where you could at least read the articles and share them and help engage others in this critical conversation. But yeah, Jake is back, and
Okay, so to answer your question, what I can tell you is that I do an outline, but all of this stuff is like off the top of my head. So I'll do an outline like 20, 30 minutes before I get on the space. I'm like, I want to talk about this today. So, all right, let's put an outline together. How are we going to order these topics so that they all flow together and all make sense?
and
And
as
then
soon as you see
actually
it, you know
all,
what you want to say.
what's that?
And when you see what's written down, you know what you want to say.
Yeah, exactly. Like bullet points of like, oh yeah, that, you know. And then in that sense, yeah, it's all off the cuff. It's just completely ad libbed. But that's kind of the beauty of what it is that I do, is that I understand this stuff so well that I'm able to give commentary on the fly like that.
Yeah.
It's a gift
It
from
was a
God.
great space. I have to say, I was genuinely impressed. I mean, I've always enjoyed your spaces, but I was very impressed listening earlier today. And actually, I wanted to ask you, we're running out of time, unfortunately, so I want to ask you a couple things quickly before we wrap up. I really enjoyed your commentary in terms of just sort of I'm going to use the word absurdity of modern political spectacle that we had, okay, the Republicans featured Hulk Hogan and the Democrats derided that. Oh, that's so silly. But then they invite Megan the Stallion as like a keynote speaker and someone who's like in the audience who I didn't even remember the name of the artist. I thought it was really humorous how you were describing the guy who does the song "Turned Down for What." So the guy's just, it's a one lyric song, "Turn down for what?" And he's just basically walking through the audience yelling this at people. And this is what politics is now. I was talking about this with a friend right before we went on air. We are literally in a surreal state. I mean, surrealism in reality is upon us. Could you just share some of your observations about what the modern political spectacle has become?
Sure. I can say that it has gotten to this level of ridiculousness because we've allowed it to. We have what these, whether it be the RNC or the DNC, are being propped up for is for the people, the masses. And who it is being propped up by is these millionaire or billionaire classes that really don't know the people well at all. You see what I'm saying? Like, they
Yeah.
think that they know them,
Right.
but they don't. So that's why it's
Right.
cheesy. That's why it's bad. That's why it's like, well, who
Right.
can we get to pump everybody up? Let's get Lil Jon in here. Let's see if
Right.
he's willing to do it for $100,000. We have $1 billion budget. So how's $100,000, Lil Jon? Screen turned down for what? For 2 minutes. We'll give you $100,000 and you can be right out the building. He's like,
Right.
hell yeah. All right. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
these people don't care about, like, whether it be a Hollywood celebrity or a singer or something, or a politician. These stars, most of them, because there are some exceptions, there are some good people, but many of them,
Yeah.
especially the ones in like big time, they don't care about the people that follow them. They don't care about the people that believe in them. They don't care about the people that worship them. They just
Yeah. And I
want
mean,
all that attention.
yeah, and I mean, I could also kind of say, I'm not trying to encourage anyone to sell out here, but it's also for a musician, it's just a gig. Like as a musician, if you offered me money to play at the Republican or Democrat, I'd say, yeah, I'll do a gig.
Well, yeah, exactly. So these people are entertainers for the most part. And that goes for the politicians too, because they're just saying the
Yeah.
lines in front of the camera. They're not actually writing these bills. They're sponsoring them, but it's their staff that are writing them. And guess who the staff are working with? The corporations that are lobbying them to write things a certain way. This is how you can get liability shields for big pharma before the vaccines roll out. Or this is how you can get liability shields for big agriculture like Monsanto, just as soon as they roll out their GMOs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and then they're glyphosate covered products. This is how
Yeah.
this works. And the only way that we're actually going to move forward is if we have somebody that understands how this stuff works and is willing to take a stand and say, no, that's not good for the people. That's good for the corporations. We're not doing that anymore.
Yeah. Well, man, we're out of time. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. Really quick, in like 30 seconds, can you tell us your website, your Twitter handle, and how people can follow you and what you're doing?
Sure. My website is forbiddentruthacademy.com. That's Forbidden Truth, Truth, academy.com. And at forbiddentruthacademy.com, you will find, if you like this content, you will find all sorts of other content, things like podcasts that I've done, interviews that I've done, spaces that I've done, videos I've done, interviews, etc. So all of that's on the website. It's all for free. And then you can also find, like my book, One Mind at a Time, A Deep State of Illusion. And that's a really good buy. And then you can also go to follow me on Twitter at America Shaman. That's America Shaman, at America Shaman on X or Twitter.
Excellent. Jake Angeli-Chansley, thank you so much for joining me. Keep up the great work. And yeah, very excited that we got a chance to talk. Have a great evening, my brother.
Namaste. Pleasure was mine.
When you walk with open arms towards the sun, you feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive and you don't have to be afraid of anything, 'cause you know the truth, and the truth is love. Yes, it is. Wasn't what they said to you or anything that you learn from a book or from the news. It's not like that, 'cause it's a thing. It is something that you do. Doop 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 a doo. Doop 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 a doo. Doop 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 a doo. Dib on baby did long. Doop 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 a doo. Doop 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 a doo. Doop 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 a doo. Dib on baby did love's the highest truth. Nothing could be higher than love, my friend. Love's the deepest truth. Nothing could be deeper than love, my friend. When you stop and you take the time just to think about your life, you'll recall the ones you love and the ones who were always there for you. Better thank those friends better. You better make amends. Go and tell them now, yeah. Tell them what they mean to you.